Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I would just like to say that for the last 25 weeks, all of us have had a large part of our focus, both emotionally and financially, directed at Israel, and rightly so. For me personally, and many of you will know this, almost every spare non-working hour has been dedicated to advocating for Israel. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with our brave brothers and sisters fighting Hamas and those still held hostage. And we have all been uplifted by the massive amount of support Israel has received from the global Jewish community and its non-Jewish allies and friends since October the 7th. The Talmud tells us, Aniye Ircha Kodmim, the poor of your city come first, an ethical concept that predates by millennia the phrase, charity begins at home. The late great Chief Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, explained Aniye Ircha Kodmim as being like the safety announcement on a plane, that in the event of a loss of cabin pressure and oxygen masks dropping from the overhead compartments, you should attach your own mask before that of your child. In his words, just as we must make sure that we look after our own health before we look after others, as Jewish donors, our first imperative is to make sure our own local Jewish institutions are in good health before attending to the needs of Jews beyond our community. We have seen and heard tonight in graphic and heart-wrenching detail how the Fed is the living embodiment of Aniye Ircha Kodmim, the poor of our city come first. Our imperative is to ensure that our fellow Mancunian Jews are healthy, cared for, and when the need arises, as you heard tonight, literally kept alive. The Fed supports more Manchester Jews than any other Manchester Jewish social care charity. We support Jewish people of all ages and identities, from secular to Haredi. We provide more services than any other UK social care charity, Jewish or otherwise. So statistically, what does that mean? It means that we support an astounding 1 in 7 Jewish homes across our city region and over 6,500 of our fellow Mancunian Jews every year, all at no cost to our community clients. It means, looking back at 2023, that we provided over 22,000 instances of support, including over 6,300 befriending or medical escort sessions, and enabled over 2,500 attendances at groups that enhance people's mental well-being or provide support for children with complex needs. It means we provide loving, state-of-the-art care to 150 residents and tenants at Heathlands Village, 40% of whom rely on our charitable support to live out their later years in a warm, familiar, uplifting Jewish environment. And many of you here tonight in this room will know from personal experience just how fantastic Heathlands is. It means we provide professional, responsive and caring advice, support and services to people suffering from poor mental health, poverty, sexual and domestic abuse, urges to self-harm, isolation and loneliness, life-limiting illness and bereavement, as well as Holocaust survivors and refugees who wish to share their life stories. And it means that to do all this, to run all the different services that address all these people's needs, we must raise more than any other Manchester Jewish social care charity, £2.5 million this year alone. Most, if not all of you, will know someone, a family member or friend who has benefited from the Fed services, whether you realise it or not. The people we help are hiding in plain sight. They are your neighbours, the people you sit next to in shul, the children your children or grandchildren go to school with, or the person you stand next to in the queue at the deli. But because our work is by its very nature confidential and often highly sensitive, few of those we help are prepared to come forward and let us share their stories publicly. This is totally understandable, and it explains why we are so indebted to Henry Shavana, who we are delighted is here with us in the room tonight, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And the anonymous person represented by Marlon for helping to explain to you how we support people and transform their lives. Let me make this a bit personal. I was the person who received that first call to the Fed for help from Mike's friend, as you heard about from Marlon. I heard the desperation, the urgency and the helplessness in the caller's voice. It really shocked and upset me. I'm not a social worker and I don't work in our community services team, but people identify me with the Fed, and so I'm quite often the first person they reach out to when they require help. Of course, I refer them immediately to my professional colleagues, but let me tell you this, it is an absolute privilege to play even the smallest part in the life-transforming and often life-saving support the Fed provides to our fellow Jews. My wife Adele often asks me if it scares me that ultimately I'm responsible for raising the £2.5 million a year the Fed requires to continue to be our community's safety net. My answer to her is no, I'm a professional and finding ways to raise money is my job. But I tell her what does scare me and keeps me up at night is what will happen to all the thousands of our fellow Jewish Mancunians who desperately need the Fed's support if we do not raise this money. And yet at the same time, I remind her and myself that we live in an absolutely incredibly warm and generous community, and our donors understand what the Fed does and the difference the Fed makes. We are supported by wonderful, loyal people like all of you who are our partners in our work. And that is why your support tonight is so crucial. Please remember, the Fed is not a national Jewish charity operating satellite services in Manchester whilst being mostly funded by a vast wealthy pool of London donors. The Fed does not have that luxury. We are a local charity serving your local Manchester community, and 90% of our funding comes from local donors, people like you. Aniye Ircha Kodmim, the poor of your city come first.